You might think buying a classic 1970s car is a smart investment, but here's the brutal truth. Most of these so-called classics will drain your wallet faster than a busted radiator. The 1970s were a disaster decade for American automakers, and these 20 cars prove exactly why you should avoid them at all costs. Let's start with the Lada VAZ, also known as the VAZ-2101. This Soviet-era nightmare was based on the Italian Fiat 124, but somehow the Russians managed to make it worse in every possible way. With only 64 horsepower from its 1.2-liter engine, this car took a painful 22 seconds just to crawl from 0 to 60 miles per hour. The top speed was a laughable 87 miles per hour, making highway merging a death-defying experience. The car was so slow that Jeremy Clarkson famously called it simply the worst car in the world. These cars lost 20 to 30% of their value in the first year alone, and today they average around $7,763 in value. The engine was designed to run on low-octane Russian fuel, which made it perform even worse with Western gasoline. Water damage and rust were constant problems, and the experimental rotary engine versions often needed complete rebuilds after just 12,000 miles. The build quality was so poor that while designed to survive a nuclear blast, it ironically couldn't handle basic water exposure. Export models were supposedly built with thicker steel and reinforced transmissions, but this only made them heavier and slower in Western markets, where they received strongly negative critical reception. The Lada's design incorporated mechanical changes for the Soviet environment, such as reworked suspension and higher ground clearance, but these modifications actually made it functionally and aesthetically inferior in Western markets. A notable downgrade from the Fiat 124 was the replacement of rear disc brakes with less effective drum brakes, a cost-saving measure that compromised stopping power. Later production years, particularly during the 1990s, were plagued by quality control issues attributed to declining worker morale and the company's deteriorating state. Next up is the Ford Pinto, a car so dangerous it became a textbook example of corporate negligence. Ford rushed this subcompact into production with strict weight and cost targets, but they forgot one tiny detail: safety. The fuel tank was positioned right behind the rear axle, making it incredibly likely to rupture and explode in rear-end collisions. Ford engineers knew about this deadly flaw from pre-production crash tests, but the company decided it was cheaper to pay lawsuit settlements than fix the problem. Internal documents showed they valued a human life at just $200,000, while the fix would have cost only $11 to $20 per car. This horrific decision led to hundreds of burn deaths and injuries, resulting in a massive recall of 1.5 million Pintos in 1978. The car offered a range of weak engines, from a 75 horsepower 1.6-liter four-cylinder down to just 54 horsepower by 1978 Nitin Citroën. Even with the optional V6, the Pinto could barely manage 11 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. The phrase, "Pinto leaves you with that warm feeling," became a dark, ironic joke, reflecting the public embarrassment the car caused Ford. Today, these death traps average around $10,747 in value, with some selling for as little as $2,000. Most of the 3 million units produced succumbed to rust, or were simply replaced rather than being fixed, indicating their truly disposable nature. The core design flaw was compounded by insubstantial bumpers that offered little protection in rear impacts. While the Pinto featured rack and pinion steering, which was somewhat innovative for its time, the aggressive cost and weight targets imposed during development directly led to these critical safety compromises, overshadowing any positive engineering aspects and rendering the vehicle fundamentally flawed from a safety perspective. The Chevrolet Vega looked promising when it won Motor Trend's Car of the Year award in 1971, but it quickly became a nightmare for owners. The innovative aluminum engine block was designed without cylinder liners, which turned out to be a terrible mistake. These engines constantly overheated, consumed massive amounts of oil, and had a nasty habit of warping and cracking. The lack of a coolant recovery tank made the problem even worse. But the engine wasn't the only disaster. These cars rusted so badly that some actually started rusting on showroom floors due to inadequate rust-proofing. By 1972, 6 out of every 7 Vegas produced had been recalled for various defects. The standard 2.3-liter engine produced between 90 and 110 horsepower, which meant sluggish 12-second sprints to 60 miles per hour. Even the high-performance Cosworth version, which cost double the price of a regular Vega, couldn't save the model's reputation. The Cosworth variant could achieve 0 to 60 in an impressive 7.7 seconds in pre-production tests, but its limited production and astronomical cost failed to offset the widespread negative reputation of the base model. Mechanical failures were also common, with throttles sticking open and rear axle shafts loosening. The Vega's design and engineering featured several ambitious but ultimately problematic choices. While intended to be lightweight, the car ended up heavier than initially planned. Furthermore, severe cost-cutting measures during production led to drastic reduction of quality control divisions, directly contributing to the vehicle's widespread defects. This simultaneous pursuit of innovation and cost reduction proved disastrous, as the novel engine design was not adequately developed or supported by robust manufacturing processes, making the core powertrain fundamentally unreliable. Today, Vegas average around $18,818, but many of the higher value sales are heavily modified cars rather than original examples. The Triumph TR7 was supposed to be the shape of things to come, but it turned out to be the shape of disappointment. This British sports car was plagued by quality problems from day one, largely due to constant labor strikes at the Speak factory near Liverpool. The distinctive wedge design was polarizing, and many buyers hated the radical departure from traditional British sports car looks. 2.0-liter engine produced just 92 horsepower in most markets, but California models were strangled down to only 76 horsepower due to emissions regulations. Even worse, the electrical system was notoriously brutal, prone to frequent shutdowns that left drivers stranded. The combination of an aluminum head on a cast iron block created endless headaches for owners. Water leaks were so common in T-top models that many owners gave up trying to fix them. Engine overheating was another frequent complaint, with some test cars reportedly boiling over during evaluations. The initial decision to offer only a fixed-head coupe, driven by perceived U.S. safety regulations. The TR7's wedge styling, penned by Harris Mann, was a bold design choice that aimed to be futuristic. However, this daring departure from the traditional curved shapes of British sports cars backfired with the public and press, who associated British sports cars with more conservative aesthetics. This aesthetic misjudgment, combined with the engine being seriously underpowered for its sporty looks, particularly in the US market, meant the car failed to meet performance expectations. Despite being Triumph's best-selling TR model, with 115,000 units built, the TR7 averages only $7,497 today, with some selling for as little as $2,450. The Plymouth Volare and its twin, the Dodge Aspen, started life with high hopes and even won Motor Trend's Car of the Year award for 1976. But this early success was completely fake, masking serious underlying problems. These cars earned the infamous title of Lemon of the Year from the Center for Auto Safety. The problem started immediately. Severe body rust appeared within just 2 years of purchase. Even Chrysler's legendary Slant 6 engines began failing due to cost-cutting measures that cheapened critical components. The new transverse torsion bar front suspension was supposed to provide a big car ride, but instead delivered vague steering and uncertain cornering. These cars were hit with at least 8 serious recalls in 1976 alone. The 360 cubic inch V8 produced 170 horsepower in 1976, but performance was still underwhelming, with most variants taking around 14 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Chrysler introduced an all-new F-body platform, featuring a new isolated transverse suspension system designed to save space and weight while delivering a big car ride. Despite utilizing computer-aided design in their development, these engineering choices ultimately led to significant reliability and handling compromises. The vehicles suffered from terrible front suspension and overall poor build quality. The new suspension, while aiming for a softer ride, resulted in vague steering and uncertain cornering. This fundamental misjudgment in design priorities, combined with the cheapening of components that led to failures even in previously robust engines, directly contributed to the vehicle's rapid decline in reputation and value. Today, Plymouth Volares average $17,475, while Dodge Aspens average $12,784. But many of the higher value sales are for heavily modified recreation models rather than preserved originals. The AMC Pacer was initially hailed as the car of the future when it debuted in 1975, but it quickly became a symbol of failed innovation. The biggest engineering mistake was designing the car around a lightweight Wankel rotary engine that AMC never managed to install. Instead, they had to shoehorn heavy inline-6 and V8 engines into the car, making it nose-heavy and compromising its handling. The Pacer's fishbowl styling featured an exceptionally large glass area that created a portable oven effect in hot weather. Despite being unusually wide at 77 inches, the interior space was disappointing due to sharply curved and thick doors. The base inline-6 produced just 95 to 120 horsepower, while the optional V8 managed only 130 horsepower, embarrassingly low for its size. Acceleration was sluggish at 13.4 seconds to 60 miles per hour, and the top speed was limited to 90 miles per hour. The car's excessive weight, ranging from 3,190 to 3,425 pounds, hurt fuel economy, with EPA ratings as low as 16 miles per gallon in the city. The weight placed on the front end led to reports of the rack and pinion steering seizing and failing. Despite its wide stance, the rear seat could only comfortably accommodate 2 people due to wheel intrusion. The unique windows didn't roll all the way down, adding to its list of functional compromises. While the Pacer was generally noted for avoiding the scandalous mechanical issues of some contemporaries like the Vega or Pinto, its serviceability was hampered by the engine's placement, which made it difficult to access. The Pacer's most significant engineering misstep was its original design around a lightweight Wankel rotary engine, which AMC never managed to fit. By 1979, polls and experts agreed that the Pacer was one of the worst cars of all time. Today, Pacers average around $8,300, with recorded sales as low as $5,670. The AMC Gremlin was introduced on April Fool's Day 1970, which should have been a warning sign. This bizarre creation was essentially an AMC Hornet, with its rear section abruptly chopped off, creating a distinctive but awkward profile. The Gremlin carried almost 60% of its weight over the front wheels, making it nose-heavy and challenging to handle, especially in snow. The short wheelbase contributed to a choppy ride, and the steering required 6 full turns from lock to lock, making it notoriously slow to respond. Despite having various engine options, including a V8, the Gremlin's performance remained uninspiring, typically taking over 10 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. The interior space was severely compromised compared to the Hornet it was based on, with a tiny rear seat and minimal luggage space that was difficult to access through the high liftgate. The wide C-pillars created large blind spots that made driving more dangerous. The trunk, accessed through a small rear window, had less capacity than even a Volkswagen Beetle. While AMC marketed the design as purposely contentious, these compromises in functionality and aesthetics ultimately limited its broader appeal beyond initial novelty. The Gremlin offered a variety of engine options throughout its production run. Early models featured inline-6 engines, including a 3.2-liter producing 128 horsepower, a 3.8-liter making 100 to 145 horsepower, and a 4.2-liter delivering 110 to 150 horsepower. From 1972, an optional 5.0-liter V8 was introduced, producing 150 to 200 horsepower. Later, models even offered a Volkswagen Audi 2.0-liter inline-4 engine. The Gremlin's design was a direct result of AMC's cost-cutting strategy, essentially being a Hornet platform with a truncated rear. This chop-back design, while unique, resulted in a poorly worked and disproportionate aesthetic. Time magazine famously called it one of the worst cars of all time, though it surprisingly sold well due to its low price and quirky appeal. Today, Gremlins average $14,700, with recorded sales as low as $10,762. The Ford Maverick was positioned as an import fighter to compete with smaller foreign cars, and it initially sold well with nearly 579,000 units in its first year. However, the Maverick's success was built more on affordability than quality. These cars were notorious for developing rust, particularly in the wheel arches, undercarriage, and door bottoms. Oil leaks were common, even in carefully maintained examples. Older Mavericks often experienced differential problems that caused a kicking or hopping sensation when cornering. The electrical system was plagued with issues, from defective batteries to frozen radios due to faulty wiring. Brake problems were also frequent, with sticking or grabbing issues at lower speeds. Engine options included various inline-6 and V8 choices, but performance was modest, typically taking 10 to 12 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. The Maverick's styling featured a long hood, fastback roof, and short deck, echoing the popular Mustang, but in a more subdued package. While mechanically conventional and reliable, it wasn't groundbreaking. The introduction of large, ugly bumpers to meet federal regulations in the mid-1970s seriously damaged the car's appearance, representing a cheap quick fix that visually compromised the vehicle. The Ford Maverick offered a range of inline-six engines, including a 170 cubic inch, producing 105 horsepower, a 200 cubic inch, making 120 horsepower, and a 250 cubic inch, delivering 140 horsepower, 145 horsepower. The Maverick's curb weight ranged from 2,411 to 3,000 pounds. While a V8 option was offered, the car's performance remained modest for its class, particularly as emission standards took hold, leading to a decline in horsepower after 1973. Despite selling over 2 million units, most succumbed to rust or were simply discarded rather than repaired. Today, Mavericks average $19,266, but many higher value sales are for heavily modified examples. The Mercury Bobcat was essentially a rebadged Ford Pinto, which means it inherited all of the Pinto's deadly flaws while adding even less value. As a cynical marketing ploy to cash in on the small car trend, Mercury made minimal changes beyond a special grille, different hood, taillights, and badges. The Bobcat suffered from the same exploding fuel tank problem that plagued the Pinto, making it equally dangerous in rear-end collisions. It also inherited the Pinto's rust problems and gained additional weight compared to early Pintos due to body strengthening and new bumper regulations. This extra weight made it even slower than the already sluggish Pinto. The 2.3-liter four-cylinder produced just 88 to 89 horsepower, while the optional 2.8-liter V6 managed 90 to 98 horsepower. Acceleration took 11 to 13 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour, and the top speed was around 100 miles per hour. The steering required more effort than other systems, and early models came with less effective drum brakes on all four corners. Mercury wisely installed the Pinto's deluxe interior as standard trim to appeal to slightly more upscale subcompact buyers. But this superficial differentiation meant the Bobcat lacked a truly unique identity. The car's weight ranged from 2,600 to 2,800 pounds, indicating no significant advantage despite its Mercury branding. The Bobcat's design was a minimal effort to differentiate it from the Pinto, primarily involving a special grille, different hood, taillights, and badges. However, this superficial differentiation meant the Bobcat lacked a truly unique identity or significant engineering improvements over the flawed Pinto. This approach was essentially a cynical and thinly disguised ploy to cash in on the growing small car trend, resulting in a vehicle that was functionally identical to its problematic sibling. Despite its Mercury branding, the Bobcat averages only $9,293 today, with recorded sales as low as $2,200. The Plymouth Valiant shared the same basic platform as the Dodge Dart and faced similar quality declines in the 1970s. Despite its reputation as a dependable workhorse, the Valiant wasn't immune to problems. Owners reported stalling when not fully warmed up, and issues with rear doors not opening properly. The common ballast resistor problems affected many A-body Mopars, including the Valiant. While the Slant 6 engine was praised for simplicity and ease of maintenance, Valiants were prone to rust more than GM or Ford cars of the same era. The original drum brakes were not good for panic stops, and a disc brake upgrade was often recommended. Chrysler's decision to cut costs on parts in the 1970s affected overall quality. The 1970 Plymouth Valiant offered engine options including 198 cubic inch and 225 cubic inch versions of Chrysler's Slant 6, producing 125 to 145 horsepower, as well as the 318 cubic inch V8 with 230 horsepower and the performance-oriented 340 cubic inch V8 delivering 275 horsepower. The Valiant underwent minor styling changes from 1967 to 1976, mostly confined to facelifts of the grille and tail lamps. The 1970 Duster variant successfully incorporated a new sloping roofline and wedge shape to soften its look. The Valiant underwent minor styling changes from 1967 to 1976, mostly confined to facelifts of the grille and tail lamps. While the 1970 Duster variant successfully incorporated a new sloping roofline and wedge shape to soften its look, the core Valiant design remained conservative. Chrysler's decision to cheap out on parts in the 1970s affected the overall quality of Valiants and Darts. performance-oriented Duster 340 models from the early 1970s can command high prices, averaging $24,300, but standard Valiants typically fetch much lower values, averaging $18,996, with recorded sales as low as $3,500. The Dodge Dart had built a solid reputation for reliability through the 1960s, but quality began declining in the mid-1970s. While the famous Slant 6 engine remained generally dependable, owners started reporting issues like rough idling, stalling, and decreased power due to faulty sensors and ignition components. Electrical system failures became common, including malfunctioning power windows, faulty lighting, and erratic dashboard displays. Transmission problems such as hard shifting, slipping, and sudden power loss impacted longevity. Brake system concerns included premature pad wear and squeaking. Rust became a significant issue, particularly in rear wheel wells, and some models suffered from very rough bodywork and paint jobs. The 1970 Dodge Dart offered a range of engines, including the 198 cubic inch inline six, producing 125 horsepower, the 225 cubic inch inline six with 145 horsepower, the 318 cubic inch V8 making 230 horsepower. The performance-oriented Dart Swinger 340 could achieve 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds. Later models strayed from the Dart's core audience by adding unnecessary luxury features like velour upholstery and fake wood trim in the special edition models. The 1970 Dodge Dart Swinger featured a distinctive, aggressive design with a sleek fastback profile. However, the Dart's styling continuity suffered over time, and later models, particularly the 1975-76 Dart Special Edition, strayed from its core audience by adding broughamy features like velour upholstery and fake wood, which were not well received. While early 1970s performance variants like the Swinger 340 can command decent prices, averaging $33,704, standard later models sell for much less, with non-performance 1970 Darts selling for as low as $7,870. Later, 1970s Chevrolet Corvette C3 models suffered from the era's focus on emissions compliance over performance. By 1975, only two 350 cubic inch small block V8 engines were available, the base version producing a disappointing 165 horsepower and the L82 managing 205 horsepower. These figures were dramatically lower than the 300 to 400 horsepower engines of the late 1960s and early 1970s. Many vacuum-operated accessories like headlights and wiper doors were complex and prone to leaks, leading to frequent malfunctions. The interiors were prone to rattling, and early seats lacked adjustable headrests. Brake calipers frequently leaked and were expensive to repair. Cooling systems were often inadequate, leading to overheating in higher performance models. Electrical system failures were common, including malfunctioning gauges, lights, and ignition components. The later C3s moved toward a grand tourer identity rather than a hardcore sports car, with added cabin noise deadening. The introduction of a polyurethane front bumper in 1973, while meeting new safety standards, altered the car's aesthetic. The shift to an electronic tachometer in 1975, while modern, introduced a component that was difficult to repair due to its placement behind the dash. The C3's design, inspired by the Mako Shark 2 concept, featured a distinctive Coke bottle profile and flip-up headlights, while the 1978 model received a significant redesign with a fastback rear window, improving aerodynamics and cargo space. This also marked a departure from the earlier chrome bumper, high-performance aesthetic. While early C3s and big block models are appreciating classics, the smog-era C3s remain relatively cheap, averaging $20,125 for a 1975 model, with sales as low as $8,580. Later 1970s, Pontiac Firebird Trans Ams experienced a significant decline in power compared to their earlier counterparts. The 1979 model offered various engine options, including the Oldsmobile 403 V8 with 185 horsepower, the Pontiac 301 V8 with 140 to 150 horsepower, and limited quantities of the Pontiac 400 V8 with 220 horsepower, reserved for special editions. These power figures were significantly lower than the earlier 455 cubic inch V8s that produced 250 horsepower in 1975. Water leaks were a major problem, especially in T-top models. Power window motors frequently failed due to overheating, and headlight door actuators often malfunctioned. Other common issues included leaking water pumps, intake manifold gaskets, leaking coolant or oil, failing rear transmission mounts. The 1979 Firebird Trans Am received significant front and rear facelifts, including a no-grille appearance and inset quad rectangular headlamps. While these changes aimed for a more aerodynamic and aggressive look, they were applied to a platform increasingly constrained by regulations. The large 455 cubic inch V8 engine disappeared after 1976, and 1979 saw the final Pontiac 400 V8s replaced by smaller, less powerful engines. Later, 1970s Pontiac Firebird Trans Ams, particularly the 1979 model, offered various engine options. These included the L80 Oldsmobile 403 6.6-liter V8, producing 185 horsepower, the L37 Pontiac 301 4.9-liter V8 with 185 horsepower, 140 to 150 horsepower, and a final batch of Pontiac 406.6-liter V8s, making 220 horsepower reserved for limited editions like the 10th anniversary Trans Am. Chevrolet-built 305 and 350 V8s were also available. This decline in power, while the car remained visually aggressive, created a disconnect between its image and its actual performance capabilities, diminishing its appeal for performance purists. While rare examples like the 10th anniversary edition can command significant prices, with top sales over $220,000, standard 1979 Trans Ams average $34,786, and regular Firebirds average even lower at $8,300. The later 1970s, Volkswagen Beetle struggled to keep pace with advancing automotive technology. By 1970, the engine displacement had increased to 1.6 liters, producing 57 horsepower, with the Super Beetle variant managing 60 horsepower by 1971. Acceleration was painfully slow, taking around 20 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour, with a top speed of approximately 81 miles per hour. The air-cooled engine meant an unsafe and unreliable heating and defrosting system. Common problems included engine failures, faulty power locks and windows, transmission issues with slipping and hard shifting. While generally more reliable than many contemporaries, some older Beetles suffered from overheating, particularly the number 3 cylinder, which could lead to engine damage. The fuel tank's location in the front created safety concerns in major front-end accidents. The Beetle's iconic design, while celebrated for its uniqueness and aerodynamics, became increasingly outdated as the 1970s progressed. Its air-cooled rear-mounted engine configuration, while simple, limited trunk space, imposed challenges for heating and defrosting systems. The Super Beetle, introduced in 1971, attempted to modernize the design with an uprated front suspension and larger front trunk, but it still struggled to keep up with competitors' rapid advancements. By 1970, the Volkswagen Beetle's engine displacement had increased to 1.6 liters, producing 57 horsepower. By 1971, the Super Beetle variant saw a slight increase to 60 horsepower. Power was delivered through a 4-speed manual transmission, though a semi-automatic automatic stick shift was offered in some models. Fuel economy was respectable for the time, ranging from 25 to 28 miles per gallon. While these specifications highlighted its dependability and efficiency, they were far from thrilling and increasingly outdated compared to more modern competitors. Despite its historical significance, 1970s Beetles generally don't command high prices, averaging $13,995 for a 1970 model, with recorded sales as low as $2,100. The later 1970s Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme underwent significant downsizing and power reduction. Early 1970s models offered powerful V8 engines capable of 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds, but later models saw dramatic reductions in output. Available engines included a 231 cubic inch Buick V6, a 260 cubic inch Oldsmobile V8, and a 305 cubic inch Chevrolet V8, with the 1979 Delta 88 producing just 160 to 185 horsepower from its 350 cubic inch V8. Acceleration dropped to 11 to 13 seconds for later models. Common reliability issues included intake manifold gaskets leaking coolant or engine oil, fuel pump failures, power steering hose leaks, water pump failures, electrical problems including ECM failures, and power window malfunctions. The 1978 downsizing reduced the car's distinctive styling to more generic appearances. The 1970s saw a shift in American car design toward boxy shapes and a generic brougham look, which affected the Cutlass Supreme styling particularly after the 1978 downsizing. While earlier models were praised for their design, the aesthetics quickly went downhill with the 5-mile-per-hour bumper regulations. The 1978 downsizing reduced the car's length and wheelbase, but Oldsmobile cleverly maintained interior room through clever packaging. Early 1970s, Cutlass Supreme models offered powerful V8 engines, including the 350 Rocket V8, producing 250 to 310 horsepower, and the 455 Rocket V8 with 365 horsepower, capable of 0 to 60 in 6 seconds to 60 miles per hour in under 7 seconds. However, the later 1970s models, particularly the fourth generation introduced in 1978, saw a significant reduction in engine output. The engine bay was redrawn to fit only V6 and V8 engines, abandoning the longer inline sixes. This period of design, while aiming for efficiency, often resulted in less distinctive and less aerodynamic vehicles, which later struggled to gain classic appeal. Despite historical sales success, later 1970s Cutlass Supremes have significantly lower market values, with 1979 models averaging $7,600 and recorded sales as low as $10,800. The later 1970s Ford Ltd embodied the traditional American land yacht, but suffered from the industry-wide trend toward downsizing and emissions compliance. Early 1970 models offered robust V8 engines with 250 to 360 horsepower, capable of 0 to 60 in 8 to 10 seconds. However, by the late 1970s, engine outputs were significantly reduced. The 1979 Ltd was powered by the original 302 V8, which was notably less powerful than earlier versions. The Ltd2, based on the Torino, offered 302, 351, and 400 cubic inch V8s, but the base 302 produced just 130 horsepower. Rust was a significant problem, attacking virtually everywhere, including the lower firewall, rear spring attachment points, inner sills, and floors. The vinyl roof acted as a rust trap, hiding corrosion underneath. Heavy doors were prone to sagging on their hinges, and power steering pumps frequently leaked. The generic styling and boxy shapes of the era resulted in less distinctive vehicles that struggled to maintain aesthetic appeal. The design of the Ford Ltd2, introduced in 1977, was notable as one of the largest vehicles ever produced as an intermediate, released just as the entire American auto industry began downsizing. It moved away from the Coke bottle styling of its Torino predecessor toward a more generic Brougham look with boxy styling. Ford's styling during the 1970s was criticized for a relative lack of creativity and a tendency to run away from past styling in favor of angular designs. Early 1970, Ford Ltd models offered robust V8 engines, including the 351 cubic inch Windsor 5.8, 400 cubic inch Cleveland 5.8, and 429 cubic inch 385 V8, with horsepower ranging from 250 to 360. These could achieve 0 to 60 miles per hour in 8 to 10 seconds. However, by the late 1970s, engine outputs were significantly reduced due to emissions. The vinyl roof, a common feature, was used to hide manufacturing joins where the chassis was cut and stretched for extra length, creating a long-term rust trap. Later, 1970s Ltd models averaged $12,243, with recorded sales as low as $3,300. The later 1970s, Mercury Marquis served as Mercury's flagship, but underwent similar downsizing and power reduction. Early 1970 models featured a potent 429 cubic inch V8, producing 360 horsepower and capable of 0 to 60 in 8.5 seconds. By 1976 and 1977, a 400 cubic inch V8 became standard, and by 1978, a 351 cubic inch V8 was standard except in California. Later, models offered significantly less spirited performance, typically taking 11 to 13 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Common reliability issues included cracking intake, manifold gaskets, transmission failures often due to front pump failure, failing throttle position sensors, misfires due to failed spark plugs or ignition coils, leaking heater hose outlets, and excessive wear on rear axle shafts. The 1979 downsizing resulted in a shorter wheelbase while maintaining the generic Brougham look and boxy styling prevalent in American car design. The Mercury Marquis particularly in its later 1970s iterations, adopted the remarkably generic brougham look and boxy styling that became prevalent in American car design. This represented a departure from Mercury's earlier attempts at more distinctive sheet metal and brand differentiation. While generally offering a traditional soft ride, these large cars had inherent deficiencies with their solid rear axle mounted to soft springs and shocks. Early 1970 Mercury Marquis models were powered by a potent 429 cubic inch V8 engine, producing 360 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, capable of 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6 seconds, 8.5 seconds. However, as the 1970s progressed, engine outputs were reduced due to emissions regulations. The 1979 Mercury Grand Marquis offered a 5.8-liter or optional 6.6-liter V8. All engines were paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission. Despite historical sales volume, later 1970s Marquis models hold low market values, with 1979 Grand Marquis models averaging approximately $5,300. The later 1970s Chrysler New Yorker served as the corporation's flagship after the Imperial was discontinued in 1975. Early 1970 models featured a robust 440 cubic inch V8, producing 350 horsepower and capable of 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, 8.5 seconds. However, by 1979, the New Yorker rode on a downsized platform with its wheelbase reduced and weight cut by nearly 1,000 pounds. The large 400 and 440 cubic inch engines were eliminated, replaced by a standard 360 cubic inch V8 with 150 horsepower. The notorious lean burn computer-controlled system was problematic, leading to disastrous performance and frequent failures. Owners often converted engines back to traditional point systems for reliable operation. Common issues included transmission control module failures, electrical problems due to internal body control module failures, engine knocking from carbon buildup, and various oil and coolant leaks. The lean burn system was so problematic that replacement computers became unavailable, forcing owners to revert to older technology. The 1970s saw Chrysler's large cars adopt a fuselage styling theme, which made them look long, wide-hipped, and bulky. The 1979 R-body New Yorker, while downsized, still shared a pillarless four-door hardtop body style and minimal sheet metal differentiation with other Chrysler models, resulting in less distinctiveness compared to GM or Ford lineups. Early 1970 Chrysler New Yorker models were powered by a robust 440 cubic inch RB V8 engine, producing 350 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, capable of 0 to 60 miles per hour in 8.5 seconds. However, by 1979, the New Yorker was riding on a downsized R-body platform, with its wheelbase reduced from 124 inches to 118.5 inches, and weight cut by nearly 1,000 pounds. The lean burn electronic ignition system, while an attempt at modernization, proved to be a major engineering misstep, causing widespread reliability problems that severely damaged the car's reputation. Later, 1970s, New Yorker models average around $12,000, with numerous reliability issues making them expensive to maintain. The later 1970s Oldsmobile 88 underwent significant downsizing for the 1977 model year, becoming considerably lighter and shorter while maintaining interior room through clever packaging. The 1979 Delta 88 offered 350 or 403 cubic inch V8s, with horsepower ranging from 160 to 185. Acceleration typically ranged from 11 to 13 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. A significant problem was the optional Oldsmobile diesel engine, notorious for a weak timing chain that would stretch, leading to poor performance. The 3-speed automatic transmission was often incapable of handling the diesel motor's torque, leading to common failures. Other issues included intake manifold gaskets, developing oil leaks and internal coolant leaks, fuel pump failures, power steering hose leaks, electrical problems including mass airflow sensor failures, and ABS light issues. The introduction of the diesel engine was a significant engineering mistake, designed with questionable cost-cutting, that resulted in fundamental durability problems. This problematic engine, intended to offer fuel efficiency, instead became a symbol of unreliability. The 1977 downsizing resulted in a shorter and lighter car, but interior room was largely maintained through clever packaging. However, this period of design often favored boxy shapes and a generic brougham look that was less distinctive than earlier models. Early 1970 Oldsmobile Delta 88 models featured powerful rocket V8 engines, offering impressive speeds for their size. However, the later 1970s models, particularly after the 1977 downsizing, saw a significant reduction in horsepower. The 1979 Oldsmobile Delta 88 offered a 350 cubic inch rocket Vive 8 or a 403 cubic inch rocket Vive 8, with horsepower ranging from 160 to 185. Transmissions were primarily 3-speed automatics. This substantial decline in power, driven by emissions regulations, meant that later Oldsmobile 88s lacked the performance and driving excitement of their predecessors. Despite early models commanding significant prices, later 1970s Delta 88 models average approximately $5,900. Finally, the Ford Mustang II represented a drastic departure from its predecessors when introduced as a 1974 model. Designed as a smaller, more efficient response to rising Japanese imports and the oil crisis, it was based on the subcompact Pinto platform. The Mustang II was 19 inches shorter, 4.7 inches narrower, and up to 330 pounds lighter than the previous Mustang. For its first year, there was no V8 option, with the Mach 1 model powered by only a 2.8-liter V6. Even when the 302 cubic inch V8 was reintroduced in 1975, it produced only 139 horsepower due to emission standards. Acceleration was painfully slow, with the 1974 Mach 1 V6 taking 12.2 seconds to reach 60 miles per hour. Common problems included rust, particularly under doors, rear quarter panels, and hood scoops. Electrical issues led to battery draining and starting problems. Suspension could be stiffer than desired, with chirping sounds from tie rod wear. Transmission problems included failed shifting and grinding sounds. The Mustang II's design was a significant departure from its predecessors, featuring a smaller, more streamlined silhouette that reflected the era's demand for efficiency. However, this shift was often criticized for resulting in remarkably generic boxiness and a lack of visual connection to earlier, more animalistic Mustang contours. James May called it the ugliest car ever built, and its design has been criticized as remarkably generic. The Ford Mustang II's performance was significantly impacted by the era's focus on fuel efficiency and emissions. For its first year, there was no V8 option, with the Mach 1 model being powered by a 2.8-liter V6. The base engine was a 2.3-liter inline-4. Even with the reintroduction of the 302 cubic inch V8 in 1975, horsepower was notably low due to emission standards, with the V8 producing only 139 horsepower. Top speed for the V8 was around 106 miles per hour. Transmission options included a 4-speed manual and a 3-speed automatic. The Mustang II, being based on the Pinto platform, inherited some of its underlying issues. While not as infamous for the fuel tank issue as the Pinto, its shared platform raised concerns. Wavy urethane bumpers were also a sign of underlying rust. For its first year, the absence of a V8 option was a major misstep for a car carrying the Mustang name. Despite commercial success during production, the Mustang II averages $19,208 today, with recorded sales as low as $3,600. The 1970s automotive landscape was dominated by external pressures that forced manufacturers into rapid innovation, often with disastrous results. The combination of the 1973 oil crisis, increasingly stringent emissions regulations, and evolving safety standards created perfect storm conditions for automotive failure. Rushed production schedules and aggressive cost-cutting measures led to systematic breakdowns in manufacturing quality. Many vehicles suffered from fundamental flaws that made them problematic from the moment they left the factory, translating directly into high ownership costs. The intense pressure to meet new market demands for smaller, more efficient cars, coupled with the need to comply with evolving regulations, often resulted in vehicles being rushed into production or designed with severe cost-cutting measures. This led to widespread issues such as misaligned body panels, faulty components, and general assembly defects directly from the factory floor. The pervasive nature of these manufacturing inconsistencies across multiple brands, including American, British, and Soviet manufacturers, suggests a systemic problem rather than isolated incidents. The impact of emissions regulations significantly hampered performance, creating what's now known as the malaise era. Once potent engines were drastically detuned, diminishing the driving experience and alienating performance enthusiasts. Combined with often controversial design choices that failed to age gracefully, many vehicles lacked the aesthetic or dynamic qualities needed to become desirable collectibles. The introduction of stricter emissions regulations in the 1970s had a profound impact on vehicle performance. To comply with these new standards, many engines were significantly detuned, resulting in a substantial reduction in horsepower and torque. This era is often referred to as the malaise era, due to the general decline in automotive dynamism. The diminished driving experience and reduced performance significantly impacted the appeal of many models, particularly those that had previously been known for their power or sporty characteristics. For discerning classic car enthusiasts, the financial realities of owning most 1970s vehicles far outweigh any romantic appeal. The cost of addressing decades of rust, chronic mechanical problems, and inherent design flaws quickly escalates, often exceeding the modest market value of these vehicles. While some rare variants have developed niche followings, the vast majority represent poor financial investments. The inverse relationship between high maintenance and restoration costs and low market value is a primary driver of worthlessness for many of these cars. Many mass-produced economy cars from the 1970s were built in high volumes, saturating the market and limiting their future collector appeal. Unlike truly rare or historically significant models, these cars often lacked distinctive features or had styling that simply did not age well. While some problematic vehicles have ironically developed a cult following due to their unique quirks or historical notoriety, this niche appeal often translates to only modest market values. For these cars, even a few original examples survive due to high attrition rates from rust and mechanical failure. The surviving units are still not highly sought after by mainstream collectors, further solidifying their worthless status as investments.